Breaking into the ad industry is no easy task. Hearing the break-in stories, however, of advertising trailblazers can empower us to forge our own break-in schemes. In this episode, I interview Roy Milton, who is an Associate Creative Director at VMLY&R in Kansas City. As well, he is recently awarded the 2020 AAF Kansas City Trailblazer of the Year, which cements him as the perfect guest. We had a great conversation about his family, his come-up, and his creative background. He stresses the importance of engaging in those side passion projects that spark creativity. As well, the importance of staying involved and giving back to your local community. Because being in touch with your community and yourself is the best way to understand human truths, which can be applied to all of advertising and all targets across the world. So head over to Instagram at Entering Ad. You can find us at Entering Ad once again to find all of Roy's recommended resources, additional advice, and cool graphics. If you could give this episode 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts, it would mean the world to us. So, without further ado, this is the Breaking and Entering podcast, and I am your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. Roy Milton, welcome to the Breaking and Entering podcast. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk with you.
Cool. Well, we're excited too. Associate Art Director. Is that correct?
Associate Creative Director.
Associate Creative Director at VMLY&R. Great agency nowadays.
Yeah, a lot going on. We're definitely busy.
That's good. That's good. And you're staying busy throughout the pandemic still?
Yeah, in fact, in many cases, we've actually picked up business quite a bit. So it's definitely keeping us busy.
Nice. So yeah, I'm super excited to talk about your story. VML and Y&R were two separate agencies. At one point, they combined, they merged, and now they're like this super agency out there that I'm sure a lot of students know about. You guys were, I know, Ad Age talks about you guys a lot. I got a copy here. I think it's pretty well known. So how would you define VMLY&R now? Just is it one of your traditional ad agencies? What do you say from your end?
Well, I think at our core and the founding and the origins of the agency is digital at heart. When VML was first founded, it was a digital or web services company, essentially. We created massive, websites and microsites for clients. And so at its core, it has always been about providing digital experiences for customers and for clients alike.
Gotcha. And now when you hear that as a creative person yourself, does that get you excited or is it kind of gross you out, digital?
It definitely gets me excited. I think, going back to maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, no one really knew what digital meant. And that was before iPhone, before text messaging.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a big unknown. It was like, well, what is this digital thing? And seeing the transformation in the last, decade or more has been exciting. Also, it has been, a new challenge. Everything is a new challenge because behaviors of consumers and people are changing. So it's definitely something that no day is alike, and it continues to evolve for us.
Yes. Well, technology is evolving a lot as well. So that makes sense. As well, on top of the VMLY&R agency, you're also here. I see you're involved in the AAF. You want to touch upon what role you are in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited about that. This is my first time being on the AAF board here in Kansas City.
Nice.
My role and desire for joining the board was 2 reasons. One, I wanted to do what I could to get involved in the local community here in Kansas City and help bring about change, and to build relationships, build connections here in the city and in the community. And then the second reason was I wanted to also be involved and step up for representation purposes as well, because the more that there are Black creatives, Black advertising professionals that are serving on boards, that are volunteering their time, getting involved and rolling up their sleeves at a local level, the more that change can actually happen for younger Black, Brown, and minority and BIPOC students that are the future of this industry, quite honestly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's so many great programs. I want to give a shout out to the AAF. I interviewed Steve Pacheco, and I was originally a student in the AAF. Just all the programs they have, the MPMS program is just. I think their applications are out right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's never been a greater time and a greater need for young students to find internships than like right now, where so many internships programs were actually put on pause or canceled altogether because of the quarantine and COVID-19.
Yes, yes, and maybe we can hint at some advice that you have for those students that are looking for internships and for full-time jobs towards the end of the episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're obviously doing great things. You're very involved. Um, but let's throw it back. So where are you from? What made you say I want to do this advertising thing?
Yeah. So, interesting enough, I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas, born and raised. Most of my family is still there. Small town, but also, the biggest town in Arkansas. And, I came from a family that was very creative and very unique, middle class family. And my dad was actually a talented artist, really, really great artist and drawer, and was very creative. He's always been very creative and hands-on, whether it's tinkering with cars, which he's done and rebuilt cars, to I remember younger years where he actually used to paint and sell his paintings on the weekend. So naturally I kind of had a creative bent and focused on drawing and focused on art as a young person. And crazy enough, when I was younger in school, I wanted to be an architect, which I actually find pretty common amongst art directors or just those that are in the creative field. Many people I've talked to had an interest in architecture. However, I completely sucked at math. I was just not very good. I didn't enjoy it. And so I naturally gravitated just more towards graphic design. I thought that I would do, graphic design posters and album covers like a lot of graphic designers did early on, years ago. And I did do some of that stuff. And then naturally, obviously, as we talked about at the beginning, the industry began to change and transform into this more about digital, and multimedia used to be the term before it was even digital.
Sure.
So I naturally just kind of found my way into the industry with a lot of work and a lot of grind and grit, I guess you could say. So that's kind of my background. But yeah, in Arkansas, I didn't have any mentors that were in the industry. No one I knew around me was doing advertising or even design. But I knew that it was something that I wanted to be a part of and I wanted to pursue as a career field pretty early on. So, I had to leave, Arkansas and leave my comfort zone really to find other ways to get into this thing of being a graphic designer and being creative.
Yeah, so you had this kind of vision, like, so you stumbled upon graphic design. You just said that you had to leave and get outside of that area to grow. So where did you go?
So after high school, so when I was actually, so interesting enough, in my junior to senior year, I completely changed, sat down with my high school counselor, who was actually pushing me to be in a lot of AP classes at the time in order to get my credits up for
Yep.
college.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't want to go to college. I don't want to go to like normal school. I want to pursue art. And so I ended up finding this program in my junior year into my senior year where I could um, still get college credit, but go to a vocational tech school. And this was in 1997, 98, I believe, and was the first time first time actually being exposed to um, graphic design, or even just, as we called it back then, commercial art and computer graphics. So
Sure.
half of the day in high school, I went to normal classes, and then the other half, I would leave and go on campus to a vocational tech school and still earn sort of towards college credit. And that
Yeah.
was where I actually took my computer graphics and commercial art class. And I believe that that was my first time being exposed to Adobe Illustrator, which was probably like Illustrator 4 or 5 or something.
Sure.
So that was really kind of the catalyst that really got me forward. And then I ended up, and actually, interestingly enough, it was during one of the classes at the Votech where someone from the Art Institute came as a speaker to show student portfolios, graduate student portfolios in graphic design.
Sure.
And it was that moment that I locked in. I said, that's what I want to do. And I did. I actually applied for the Art Institute of Atlanta, gotten accepted before my senior year actually had started.
Nice.
And my family and I, we flew down to Atlanta and went and visited the campus and got accepted, but ended up having to transfer to Dallas because it was too expensive for my parents to afford a 4-year bachelor's degree in graphic design. So I transferred to Dallas and got an associate's degree where it was a little less expensive, but still was, pretty pricey for my parents at that time.
Gotcha. So what was that school called that you transferred to?
The Art Institute of Dallas.
Nice.
Yeah.
So and the major at that time was called what again? Commercial.
Yeah, it was commercial art and computer graphics.
Wow.
Yeah, commercial art and computer graphics. So yeah, we learned to draw, Bezier curves and all those things and do, compositions and of graphic design. And we were high school kids essentially. And most of us did not take that class very serious. But for me, it was something that I knew that I wanted to pursue, even though I didn't know what that looks like because there was no one around me doing
Right.
it. So I really just kind of had to set a path and just go on it, even though I didn't know what that would look like.
Right. And you kind of put yourself in environments that were similar and would foster that creativity. Those student portfolios is what really drew you in, huh?
Yeah, it was that moment seeing that because I knew that I wanted to do something creative. I knew that I wanted to do something that sort of had a bigger purpose, because art can be for self-expression or it can just be art for the sake of being art. But seeing the graphic design where it was art actually communicating a higher purpose or message, it
Yeah.
really intrigued me as a high school student. And again, I didn't even know what advertising was, but I
Right.
knew that that was something that looked appealing to me as a, you know, 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid.
Sure. So when did you connect the dots between the graphic design and then advertising itself?
I think it wasn't until I went into the Art Institute of Dallas.
Yeah.
So I graduated high school and I literally did not take any time off. I remember graduating from McClellan High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. And then a month later, my parents, we packed up the car and actually drove me to Dallas to drop me off for school because I started in the summer session.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
started, I think the first week in July of 1999. So I didn't, I just jumped right in.
Wow. So with those classes and that experience there, what was that like? Were you able to kind of carve out the path where you knew you would get into advertising?
Yeah, so it as I was exposed to the courses and the curriculum and the instructors, it really began to click for me, and it was really by my own initiative because it was one, I was 17 years old. I actually graduated and started school when I was 17, and then I turned 18 in that September.
Yeah.
So I was so young, and it was the first time that I was out on my own and
Yeah.
away from my parents. I didn't have any family in Dallas, so I had no one to really rely on, and it was sort of the first moment that I had to put my big boy pants on and
Yep.
actually like, if I'm going to do this, I have to go all in and really give it. And over the course of the semesters, I learned and poured myself into graphic design and into my instructors. And I was fortunate enough to have some really great instructors. And I actually had one instructor later in my course education that was very, very difficult, very, very hard on me. Actually failed me the first time that I had his class, and
Wow.
then I took it again, was more serious, and we actually kept in contact for a number of years, even after I graduated and started working in the industry. He actually invited me to come back to talk to other students, and I remember him, telling me one day that I knew that there was something about you that could be good in this industry and be a great designer. And that's why I was so hard on you, because I wanted you
Nice.
to reach your potential. So it
Wow.
really started to kind of click for me once I got into it.
Mhm. Wow. And sometimes those tough professors are, they care about you the most. So I think that's proof right there. And he's probably been a mentor for you.
Yeah. Oh, he definitely was, for sure.
Yeah. Nice. So you worked hard, and then as you went on with that program, did you realize that you had to get a higher education at that point? Was that just a stepping stone? When did that click for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a student at the time at the Art Institute, everyone, like the Art Institute of Dallas,
Yeah.
it might have actually moved now, but we actually were connected and shared the same parking lot with the Richards Group. And that was, to me, that was like the biggest agency in the world, because I didn't know anything else. And I remember, like, we could literally, out of the classroom windows, could look out and see the Richards Group building across the parking lot, and every student wanted to go there. And actually, one
Yeah.
of my professors, David Belo, who is now a professor in graphic design, um, adjunct professor in Washington, was actually working at the Richards Group at the time, and so he was working there, and then he also taught at the Art Institute of Dallas. So it was almost like, okay, I want to try to find a way to be like Belo. To be like Belo was many of our thing, and
Yeah.
it started to click for me over time, but it wasn't immediate. But I just had to pour myself in. I'm not even sure if I answered the question or not.
No, you did. You did. I think I just find these stories so interesting because the creative track is so different, especially maybe nowadays where for the most part you have to make a pretty big choice as an undergrad whether you're going to go to those portfolio schools or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I will also say, the other thing that I learned as a young student, even before I became a young professional, as I was applying for jobs, I started to notice that the job descriptions were beginning to change. And this was right when, um, this was maybe like just before the first iPhone was invented by Steve Jobs. And what was interesting was at the Art Institute at that time, if you wanted to be a design student, you had to take graphic design courses. If you wanted to do anything related to web or website design, you had to take the multimedia design track.
Mhm.
um, and so it wasn't really connected. Whereas you think about now, if you're a designer, it's all about experience design. It doesn't matter whether you're creating for broadcast or digital, or you're creating for web applications or mobile applications. Design is just design. But back then it was so linear, and it was a specific track. So I didn't take multimedia courses and learn web design. I actually, in fact, had one web design course, and it was actually web coding, where we had to code HTML. We had to hard code it.
Oh,
And that course actually, I think I got a B in that course.
nice.
And the end result was that we had to design a website and then actually hand code it in HTML, and I was able to do that. But as I started to notice over the years as a young professional starting out, the job descriptions were changing, and it was like, you're a graphic designer and must know multimedia design or must know HTML. And it's like, well, okay, well, I guess I need to pick up a book and learn more about HTML in order to stay employed and get a job, right? Because it started transitioning. So a lot of the skills that I have today were not really actually taught in school, because when I started, things were completely different. So I had to learn. and take the initiative to pick up books. Like I taught myself how to code in CSS. Never took one CSS class like in school. I've done online classes, but I know how to code in CSS. I can write code to this day. And I can speak and help with developers that are working on projects because I'm kind of self-taught in a lot of things.
That's probably super useful for today. I mean, in general, I'm sure that's helped you a lot in your career, being able to speak to the code and the design of everything. Do you recommend students do that today if they have that option?
Yeah, and I've had mentors that have spoken to me about being a like you want to be a T, like the letter T
Yeah.
as in Tony. You want to be a T-shaped person
Right.
where you have experience and skills in a lot of different things, but you might have that one thing that you go, vertically deep down in. Like you might be one of the go-to experts for, but
Right.
having knowledge and information and experience in a lot of things can help out in so many different ways today.
What would you say in the T sense? What's the depth, the skill that you have the most depth with or in?
That's a really good question. I think my people skills and my my ability to be able to understand people is a really great thing. I think because of my background and because of my experiences and multicultural experiences and being around a lot of different types of people, it actually helps me think, even as a creative, about boiling my ideas down and boiling my work down to a basic human truth because I understand people, right? And that I think is a very that can be a superpower because you want to always create work that people can relate to. Yes,
Yeah.
you have to create work that's on strategy, that's on brief for the client, but at the end of the day, we're marketing to people. And we use terms a lot in this industry like millennial or the demographic or what's the target.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, they're just people. And if you know how to be a good person, you know how to be someone that can connect with people, that understands how people think, what drives their decision, even when they say they do one thing or they believe in one thing, but their behaviors actually show something different. If you
Hmm.
can understand the difference between the two, you can always find ways to create relevant work and stay relevant.
Interesting. And I'm sure that takes a good amount of time and experience to get a understanding for. I mean, coming out of college, I'm sure not a lot of us will have that. Maybe some more than others, but to apply it to the work setting is another skill in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not, it can be taught, it can be learned over time. It's not something that you just jump into over
Right.
time. And the reason why is because people's behavior is always changing.
Right.
So being connected to culture, being connected to diverse groups of people and diverse thinkers actually improves your people skills because you can understand different behaviors.
Right. 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 How do you stay um, in tune with various cultures today?
I think naturally through my organic relationships
Yeah.
are important. Which is why I do so much in or try to find ways to do things within the local community and the local ag community, building relationships, having conversations with individuals, even just like yourself. Understanding your background, what drives and motivates you, um, continues to help me in the conversation of being connected to culture and understanding that, hey, you know what? Not everybody thinks like I do. Not everyone has the same experience. And also knowing that just by listening to someone else's experience, I can gain something from that.
And it's really smart that, and I guess it makes sense to me as well. Being in tune with your own local community is it's probably a representation of a larger scale setting too. if you go out to these different spots and you understand what these people are thinking, what they're doing, people are people, right? I mean, that's probably a really good practice and element to understand people as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And observing people, observing the different dynamics that people have, the different motivations, what drives them, and all at the end of it is just about listening, right? Is listening to what's said and listening to what's not said. And you're observing, being a sponge in environments and in communities is the key.
Yeah. And then I mean, how do you tie it back to the work then? You're out there, you understand people, and as a creative role in your at VMLY&R, how can you take those experiences and directly apply it in that setting?
That's a good question. I was actually having a discussion with a young graduate student yesterday who was a part of the Where Are All the Black People conference, which is a conference that is about shining light and exposure on young Black talent that is trying to break into the advertising industry. And the advice that I had given her was be authentic, be yourself, and whatever you do to find inspiration that fuels you as a creative, it will find its way into your work in some way or another. I met a young lady once before that she was Japanese, and so she was a fantastic art director, but she had a side hobby of actually hand carving these little miniature dolls and little miniature elements.
Hmm,
And so the practice of doing that, she eventually ended up having a online Etsy store, sold it, right,
nice.
and um, was able to do amazing work. I think she used to work for either AKQA or RGA. I can't remember.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but finding the things that inspire you as a creative, because it could be whether you crochet, whether you paint, um, whether you make music. A lot of my friends in Austin that when I lived in Austin, Texas, we had a bicycle group where we all used to ride road bikes together, and our group was pretty large. I think there was an average of about 20 to 30 of us that would ride 2 times a week on
Nice.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. And what was so interesting was most of the people that rode with us were in the creative field. They were designers, they were art directors, they were art buyers, they worked in agencies, they were account guys. There was even a guy in our group, a writer that was a lawyer, but he was a copyright lawyer. So he
Ah,
dealt a lot with creatives who were trying to establish copyrights and trademarks and patents for things. So, you know, whatever you do as a creative that fuels you, that keeps you energized, those things actually can find its way into your work and actually give you that inspiration that you need.
what about maybe sneakers and customizing them?
Oh, that's huge for me. I mean,
Yep, yep.
I always loved sneakers as a kid. I think what the reason why is, when I was a kid, um, growing up watching Michael Jordan play and wanting to own a pair of Jordans, they were too expensive for my parents, and so I ended up, in the fall and the winters, and even in the summers, I used to mow people's lawns or rake leaves to save up money to buy my own sneakers. Um, and I've always loved that, and that kind of gave me a connection to it. And now, obviously, I'm a sneakerhead and collector and buyer, buy sneakers. And then I've always loved to draw and paint. Right? I've
There you go.
painted. There's lots of pieces of artwork in our house that I've painted. I've painted for family and friends, and those two have merged in my life in the last 3-4 years, where I actually restore sneakers that are old or vintage collectibles. I restore them, or I customize sneakers too. So I'll buy a sneaker and actually change the colorway to it or put a theme on it.
Nice.
And so that even that finds its way into my work. So
Yeah. I think a lot of the side hobbies we have and our passions really can somehow influence the work we have in the office. What's the best? What's your favorite Jordan shoe?
Ooh. Um, so I'm a big Jordan 1 fan. I have a lot of Jordan 1s.
Right,
And
classic.
they can, yeah, it's a classic silhouette.
Yeah.
I
A
think,
lot of people say that's probably number one, but that's
yeah,
it's fair.
yeah. I would also say, I think the other thing that, even like when the re-release of the Jordan 11 Concord was a
Oh
big deal
yeah,
for me, because I remember watching Jordan in the finals and wearing those, and it was like, it was an awe. I
yeah.
mean, seeing him step on the court with those, and everybody's like, "What are those shoes? What are they?"
Yep.
Because no one had seen a basketball shoe with patent leather on it like that before. It was
Mhm.
so revolutionary. So when they re-released, it was such a big deal for me.
Yep.
So I had to get a pair. So I think that's probably one of my favorite. Now, that I will be honest though, as much as I love that shoe, it is not the most comfortable shoe
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the carbon foot plate on the bottom. Is very hard, and I have no idea how Jordan played in those, but
It's crazy what he played in. Shout out to Juice, my good friend. He says the 11s are the best by far.
yeah, they
Yeah.
are. They're so iconic. You see it. There's no
Yeah.
shoe out there that
Yeah.
looks even close to it.
All right, so let's get back to advertising. That
Yeah,
I had to ask that.
yeah.
So we talked about kind of like your passions, and I love talking to creative people because our creatives in the industry, because it always comes to that conversation. What you're passionate about, what helps you stay relevant culturally, what keeps you in the loop, and just like something to sit down to when you get home and um, to remind you why you do what you do. It's so important.
Absolutely. Because I
Um,
mean, we're all we're doing is creating ads and work, right? Like, we're actually not, heart surgeons. We're not
no,
saving lives to the point to where it's immediate life or death and someone's on our table. You know what I mean?
feels like that sometimes.
It does. It really
Yeah, or
does feel
like
like that.
I'm not even in the industry and I already kind of see that from people and feel that. So that's a good reminder. We're
Yeah,
not
we
heart
just we
surgeons.
yeah, we just try to have fun.
And that makes for better work. I know working from home might be a little bit different, but that's why agencies are fun places. Are supposed to be alive and foster creativity. It's there for a reason. You should probably relax and smile and have fun sometimes. But
Oh, absolutely.
I want to get into the heart of the show here is about breaking in to the industry. I want to hear about how you got your first real advertising job when you said, "Hey, like I did it. I'm here. This is what I want to do." How did you get there? What was the application like? What was the interview like? Give me that story.
Yeah, that's actually that's a really good point. Um, so when it came time for me to graduate from the Art Institute, because I think this really defined the trajectory of my career, and it's so important. I always have to, look back on this. Um, when it came time for my graduate portfolio, and actually my student portfolio showing to get my first job, right, in the industry, um, the actual portfolio show was like 2 weeks after 9/11 had happened.
Oh wow.
Um, Now, that was a time where there were so many things going on in our country, and obviously the first thing that happened that was impacted were advertising agencies' budgets, because no one knew what was going to happen if the country was under attack. And advertising budgets got slashed. People lost accounts.
Mhm.
And so naturally, there was no hiring going on. Now, fortunately for me, I was already working. This wasn't advertising, but I was working a third shift job at Auto Trader magazine in the HEB area in Dallas Fort Worth. And so after going to class in the day, I would go to work at night. And my job, for anybody listening to this, you don't always start off at the top. It's going to be a grind to get to where you want to get,
Yeah.
but you have to stay focused. So my job at Auto Trader as a production artist was literally opening up envelopes that I would get a box of envelopes, and inside the envelopes were physical photographs of people who wanted to advertise their car in Auto Trader magazine.
No way.
And in that was not only just a photo, but then it was an actual handwritten, hand filled out form of all the details of their car. My
No
job
way.
as a production artist was to take that and to digitize that. So I would actually open up the envelope, set the form to the side, physically scan the photograph on my scanner that was attached to my computer, import it into Quark Express, and then I would hand type the details of the car into the layout template for the magazine. And every night, as all of us who were production artists, we had to assemble so many pages of each Auto Trader magazine of the title in order to get it proofed, and then from proofing to go to actually the other side of the building, which was the press, to actually start printing the
Right.
magazine and assembling it together.
That's
And we did
crazy.
that nightly. So that was my first job as a graphic designer. From that, I actually
Yeah.
I held that for a while until 9/11, where people were starting to think about hiring, and I couldn't get a job. So I actually ended up moving into I went nonprofit, and I worked at my church, which was a mega church in Dallas, Texas,
Sure.
uh, 7 or 8,000 member church, and they had their own marketing department. So I worked in the marketing department as a graphic designer. Eventually, worked my way up to an art director, to a senior art director, to eventually actually being the marketing director for a short period of time before I left there and went back into publishing to work for Fort Worth, Texas magazine as an art director. And so in nonprofit, I worked in nonprofit for almost 7 years.
So,
Uh,
that church had its own like in-house agency.
yes, I mean
Wow.
it was about an 8,000 member church,
Okay. That
over
makes
a
sense.
hundred different programs.
Right. Right.
We
Right.
we actually my job as the marketing director, we actually published a quarterly magazine, like a full
Nice.
page colored magazine.
Yep.
We actually had published authors that wrote content and stories and different things in the magazine. So that was all coordinated. We actually end up establishing our own print shop in house as well. So we
Oh,
had a
nice.
contract, and we had several printers in house where we could print, because we were spending so much money contracting and printing out, whether it was like service programs, brochures, posters, all these things. So we actually ended up signing a contract to bring in machines and brought
There you
in
go.
part-time staff to print stuff in house.
That's legit.
Um, yeah. And at that time, I was probably 20 years old, 21 years old. I had a marketing budget of like $200,000 to $300,000 a year that I had to manage
Wow.
and apply for every year. I mean, it was crazy, but it was a
That's
lot of
young.
fun. And yeah, I was young. I learned a lot. I learned so much in that role.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I went to Fort Worth, Texas magazine, and as an art director, and did publishing there, photo shoots of styling
Sure.
for our fashion and editorial. And I mean, I just didn't have a normal path into advertising. And then I moved from that to my wife and we moved to Austin, Texas, and I worked for a casino and gaming agency, their small agency in Austin, Texas. And we did casino marketing and advertising and web design for casinos and gaming and hospitality. So we had like, Choctaw casinos. We had casinos in Washington that were clients. We had, High Regency Lake Tahoe was a client. And then we eventually moved into food and beverage. So I don't know if you're familiar with Chewy's Tex-Mex. Chewy's used to be a client of mine. So I did a lot of advertising and marketing for Chewy's. I mean, I just didn't have a normal path, but wherever my path led me, I learned something and I grew and brought that experience with me.
What's Chewy's?
So Chewy's is actually a Tex-Mex restaurant.
I don't have
That
that. I don't have that in Chicago.
Yeah, so it's a Tex-Mex restaurant. It's pretty
Is it good?
regional.
Is it
It's
a is it fast food or chain?
no, it's a private restaurant.
Hmm.
Being in Texas, they were all over the place.
Okay. Yeah.
There's one here in Kansas City actually too.
Huh. I was just curious. That caught my attention. So yeah, you definitely didn't have a normal break in a lot of publishing, it seems like, in that graphic design world. Um, when was that break into like that real, not real, but that agency experience then? When was that? 2007?
My break into agency experience was, yeah, that was about 2007.
At Sanders Wingo?
Nah,
No,
y yeah,
that's a
Sanders Wingo was actually my first major client because we were, and that was also my first experience into, multicultural marketing and advertising as well, because we were the advertising, agency, the African American agency of record for AT&T.
gotcha.
And the agency historically had other accounts as well, like State Farm Insurance.
Big ones.
Minnie Cooper was
Yep.
a client and an account. But then we also had a office in El Paso, which was actually the originating office, and so we did a lot in the El Paso area, and that stretched across healthcare, um, utilities, some other businesses. I mean, it was just quite a bit. But by nature, it was an agency. Even just how it was formed, by Bob Wingo and David Sanders, was really kind of an enigma at the time. Very unique. And the agency was always very entrenched in culture, whether it was Latin X culture or African American culture, and they continue to do that today.
Nice. And then when did you leave there?
I left Sanders Wingo when I came to Kansas City here.
Mhm.
So that was 2017, I believe.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Okay, good. Then, so obviously now you're at VMLY&R. You're doing big things there. It's one of the biggest agencies in the world right now. That's WPP, am I correct?
that is correct.
Okay. So part of the largest holding company in the world, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah,
for advertising companies. Um, so and now you're also tied into the AAF, which is hits home to me and a lot of my audience now. So I think this is probably the most important part of the episode is giving back that experience now that you have and that advice from that experience to the listeners.
hmm
Um, you mentioned that uh, you kind of were going through that portfolio review through a time that was post 9/11, like right after, right? You said like 2 weeks.
yeah, yeah. It
That
was fairly recent after that.
Yeah, and advertising is kind of a finicky industry where if it's kind of like the first to go to a lot of businesses, if it can be one of those first on the chopping block
Absolutely.
when organizations are threatened financially, and especially with COVID. Not so much. I don't know. I don't. I'm seeing a recovery. It's gradual now. When I started this podcast a couple months ago, it was real tough, but it seems to be recovering a little bit more now. But it's not the right now it's not the best time to be a student or to be a recent graduate. I know a lot of my friends and are struggling, especially those that are in the creative track trying to break in.
Right.
So just with all the experience that you have being at such a great agency with great clients that I don't know if we're allowed to talk about, but I see a list here that are just fantastic. Um, what advice do you have for them? What should they be doing now to break in?
That's a great question. So I think one of the most important things in building your network is, you know, what as an industry, one of the things that I've noticed and that we've always been about is, having people that can vouch for you, right? And that can be very difficult and also very daunting at times. Is that if you're new in the industry and you don't know a lot of people in the industry, you don't know a lot of creative directors who are looking at books by name or even by personal relationship, you can kind of feel like you're just another name on a piece of paper. But I think the most important thing is, connect with people on LinkedIn. I've said to students here recently is that with the cancellation of many internship programs, where students were hoping this would be their shot, their big break.
Yeah.
Connect with someone on LinkedIn, like you know, offer to, see if they're interested in a 15-minute virtual coffee. Virtual coffees, are becoming the new norm in a sense,
Yeah.
because as a creative director, you're busy, you've got projects, you're on deadlines, and you may not have an hour to devote to talking to someone who might be a potential candidate.
Mhm.
Um, but it's a little bit easier to commit to 15 minutes, to have a 15-minute conversation, virtual coffee, to take a
Yeah.
look at someone's book, right? And give them career advice. So the
Cool.
personal relationships are important. Connecting with them on LinkedIn, and not just connecting with them, but actually uh, making it personable to them and to their experience, so that they know why you're reaching out. That's really important. Um, Getting involved in your local community is also important too.
Huge. Huge.
Getting involved in your local advertising clubs or AIGA clubs. I've served on the board in AIGA before as well.
What's that stand
Uh,
for?
the American Institute of Graphic Arts.
See, I would not know that. Now I know that.
Yeah, it's a huge national organization that supports graphic designers and designers all across the board, across the spectrum. And there's chapters all over the country.
Hmm.
And the chapters are always doing some amazing things, whether it's mobile design, whether it's environmental design, graphic design, advertising. I mean, you name it. There's just so many different ways for you to get connected on a local level in the community, because you're building your reputation as a young professional.
Yeah.
Obviously with COVID right now and having to limit the number of people, depending on what region you're in, and wearing masks is a little bit different of a challenge than what we've seen and experienced before. But going to and showing up at events, even now, being a face on a Zoom, conference,
Sure.
making yourself known is extremely important. And then ultimately, at the end of it all, continuing to push your work. One of my friends and mentors actually was the founder of the Austin Creative Department. Will Chow. Will Chow was a creative director, group creative director at GSD&M. He's done some amazing work over the years. He now is the I think global design director at Whole Foods Market now.
Nice.
But when I was in his class, and when even just over lunches, that we've become friends, Will would always tell me, find the human truth, because if you can find the human truth in your work, if it's true for you, it can be true for everyone, because you're a human too. And so that's always stuck with me. And then he's also told me over my years, very pointedly, take care of your book.
Hmm.
Take care of your portfolio,
Yeah.
because if you take care of your portfolio as a creative, your portfolio will take care of you. And it took me a while to really understand what he meant by that. But essentially, as a creative, your book is your reputation, and it is your opportunity for the either open door or open conversation for your next gig. And continue to look and scrutinize your work. Make sure that your work is saying something about you as a creative, not about everybody else or not about your agency, but what is it about you that you're bringing unique to the world and to the perspective. And if you continue to perfect your book, because your book is never done,
Yeah.
um, you continue to perfect it, you continue to add work to it, you continue to grow your skill, you eventually will get to a point where your book will take care of you, where people will eventually know your name and know and see your work and what it means and the quality of it. And
Yeah.
they'll just come to you. They're like, hey, we're looking for an art director. We're looking for a senior copywriter. We came across your book. We came across your work. And, heck, promote yourself on LinkedIn too. Like,
Yeah.
let
Get
the
after
world,
it.
yeah, get after it. Let the world know that you exist and that you're doing stuff. You're connected. So yeah, I think those would be sort of my takeaways.
I appreciate that. Um, any just maybe like you're on your computer now, any like bookmarks that you have of like websites or blogs or anything that you follow. It's okay if you don't know them off the top of your head now, but we want to know the things that industry professionals follow. So as students and recent grads, we can follow those things to keep ourselves up to date. We can also include those in a graphic. But if any at the top of your head that you find yourself scrolling through when you're at home?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking at the CAN's website, because what I look at through CAN actually shows global work and global perspectives, and diverse work. So I think that's important. I'm always looking at Adweek too.
Sure.
Adweek is important. I look at Medium as well. Medium is a good source for content, whether it's news related. I mean, it could be politics, it could be product design. Uncrate. I like the style of the work and the products of Uncrate. Like it's also, a lot of it is just so drool worthy. It reminds me, and it could be the most craziest thing. From, I've seen Uncrate, an article on a handcrafted axe, right? It's like, it's just an axe, but the way but it draws you in, and the way it's photographed and the way they write about it. And by the way, that axe might be $300. You're thinking like, oh man, I really want to get that. No,
and then you kind of think like, maybe I could buy that. No,
yeah, you don't need a $300 axe. Like,
right. Yeah, I'm at the website. I know exactly what this is. I've seen this. Yeah.
Yeah, but you look at it and you think you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I do need this $400 puffer coat.
Yeah, exactly.
$645 I'm looking at right now.
Yeah. Wow. Exactly. I look at XXL too. XXL. What was that? XXL. It's a magazine and digital content. I mean, it's music, it's fashion.
Hip-hop,
it's hip hop. And honestly, hip hop has always driven so many other aspects of our culture, whether it's sports, whether it's fashion and sneakers, whether it's music, whether it's product.
Who had the best freestyle then? Freshman?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I thought, who do you think had the best one? I can't even think off the top of my head. I love watching those though.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on, I think with freestyles, it depends on the artist, and it depends on even just your genre of hip hop, because even that is so unique, I mean, the 808 beat is so wide. Do you like, are you a Drake fan, or are you, I like Busta Rhymes, right? Like the East Coast rap, and De La Soul. And I mean, there's so many others out there that,
well, if you got a playlist that you have, we can share it as well.
Yeah. I follow some really interesting playlists, some good playlists too.
Well, cool. Then we can include any other resources that you have. I'd just email those over to me. What's the best way for our listeners out there to reach out to you, say hello, connect? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Roy Milton 2, the number 2. I put that in there too, because I am a junior or a second. And it's a way to, I guess, establish my own identity, apart from, because you can have things mixed up with your parents if you're a junior. Sure. So I've always used the number 2 in sort of my branding. But yeah, LinkedIn, Roy Milton 2. I'm also Roy Milton 2 on Instagram as well. If you're into sneakers and fashion, hit me up there. We can definitely message and double tap on one another's photos. Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time today to speak with me on the podcast. I think that we'll wrap it up there.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this entire episode of the Breaking and Entering podcast. This was Roy Milton. This guy was awesome. I highly suggest you all reach out to him. VMLY&R is one of the best agencies right now, so get to it. Got to do my shout outs. Mikey Malarkey is our audio technician. Buchan Jung is our creative director, Audrey Nussbaum co-host, Kyle Moore, our strategist, and of course, the Midnight Oil team from the University of Illinois. Thank you all. Can't do it without you. We will see you all next week with another amazing guest. Bye-bye.